Arrival at Kepler 442. The transport ship's airlock hissed open, releasing a cloud of recycled air into the sterile corridor of Research Station Kepler 442. Kim Dejo stepped through first, a worn travel bag slung over his shoulder, his weathered hands gentle as he helped his daughter down the metal ramp. 8-year-old Sora clutched her father's hand tightly, her big brown eyes wide as she took in the massive alien structure around them. The walls stretched impossibly high, covered in blinking displays showing data streams in languages she couldn't read. The air smelled different here, metallic and cold, nothing like the earthy sense of their old home. "Welcome to Research Station Kepler 442, came a deep, resonant voice that seemed to echo from everywhere at once. Sora pressed closer to her father as a towering figure approached them. Commander Vexar stood nearly 8 feet tall, his bright blue skin gleaming under the harsh station lighting. Her muscular arms moved with precise, military efficiency, and his completely black eyes fixed on them with obvious displeasure. "You are the new human worker," Vexar stated, his tone carrying the weight of authority and barely concealed disdain. Dejo bowed respectfully. "Yes, sir. I am Kim Dejo, and this is my daughter, Sora." Sora peeked out from behind her father's leg, fascinated despite her fear. She had seen pictures of aliens before, but nothing had prepared her for seeing one in person. Commander Vexar's skin seemed to shimmer, and when he moved, it was with a fluid grace that seemed almost impossible for something so large. The commander's gaze fell on the small human child, and his expression darkened further. "Why have you brought a youngling? This is a research facility, not a childcare center." The relocation papers specified that families could remain together, Dejo replied calmly, though Sora could feel the slight tension in his grip on her hand. "Sora is well behaved and won't interfere with my work." Vexar made a sharp clicking sound with his mandibles, clearly an expression of irritation. Humans were a necessary evil on the station, the Galactic Council had insisted they needed workers, and humans were both capable and inexpensive. But he had little patience for their emotional attachments and weak constitutions. "Fine," he said after a moment, all 4 arms crossing in a gesture of resigned annoyance. "But understand this, human, the child is entirely your responsibility. If she causes any disruption whatsoever, you both return to Earth on the next transport. No exceptions." "I understand completely," Dejo nodded. As they began walking through the labyrinthine corridors of the station, Sora's fear began to mix with wonder. The walls were lined with viewing screens displaying images of the most incredible creatures she had ever imagined, beings that looked like living crystals, creatures with too many eyes, and things that seemed to be made of pure energy. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging on his sleeve, "are those real?" "Yes, sweetheart," Dejo whispered back, "but they're all safely contained. They can't hurt anyone." Commander Vexar's keen hearing caught their quiet conversation. "Do not be so certain, human," he said without turning around. "Many of these specimens have claimed the lives of workers. That is precisely why we require constant replacements." They stopped before a massive reinforced window, easily 10 feet tall and made of what looked like impossibly thick transparent metal. Beyond the glass lay a chamber filled with absolute darkness, not the simple absence of light, but something deeper and more profound. The darkness seemed to pulse and writhe, as if it were alive. "This," Commander Vexar said, his voice taking on a note of grim pride, "is our most prized and dangerous specimen. The Voidstalker." Sora pressed her small hands against the cool glass, staring into the moving darkness. For just a moment, she thought she glimpsed something that might have been eyes looking back at her. "It has eliminated 17 workers from 6 different species," Vexar continued. "No one volunteers for this assignment anymore." Dejo studied the writhing darkness with professional interest rather than fear. "What does it require for sustenance?" "Fear," Vexar replied with satisfaction. "It feeds on terror and life energy. It also requires specialized nutrient paste every 3 standard days, or it will perish." "And who handles its feeding currently?" Commander Vexar's black eyes fixed on Dejo with something that might have been amusement. "You do, human." That is your assignment. Most beings would have recoiled in horror. They would have begged for reassignment, pleaded for mercy, or simply collapsed in terror. Vexar had seen it countless times before. He waited for the inevitable breakdown. Instead, Dejo simply nodded. What time should feedings occur? Are there any dietary restrictions I should be aware of? Does it prefer the nutrient paste at a specific temperature? Commander Vexar stared at him, all four arms falling slack with surprise. Where was the terror? Where was the desperate pleading? The human was asking practical questions as if he were about to care for a household pet, not the station's most lethal inhabitant. Meanwhile, Sora had moved closer to the glass, her breath fogging the surface as she peered into the darkness. "Hello," she said softly, her small voice barely audible. "Are you lonely in there?" The darkness stopped moving. The first encounter. In all the years the Voidstalker had been contained within the station, no creature had ever addressed it directly. Every being who had approached its chamber had done so with weapons, protective gear, or pure terror. They screamed, they fled, they begged for mercy, but none had ever simply said hello. The darkness pressed against the reinforced glass, and for a moment, Sora could swear she saw something that looked almost like a face forming in the shadows, not frightening, but curious. Commander Vexar quickly pulled the child away from the window. "Do not interact with the specimen, youngling. It is not a pet, it is a predator." "But it looked sad," Sora protested, glancing back at the now still darkness. "Maybe it's only mean because it's scared and alone." "It is not alone," Vexar snapped, clearly agitated. "It is contained for the safety of all. It kills because that is its nature." Dejo gently lifted his daughter, noting how her eyes kept drifting back to the chamber. "Remember what I taught you back on Earth, Sora. Sometimes animals act aggressively when they're frightened or in pain. But we still must be careful and respectful." "I know, Daddy," she said softly, but her voice carried a note of determination that made Vexar's mandibles click with unease. They continued the tour, eventually arriving at their assigned quarters, a small but clean living space with 2 narrow beds and a compact kitchen unit. It wasn't luxurious, but it was safe and functional. "Your shift begins tomorrow at 0800 hours, Commander Vexar informed them. "You will be briefed on safety protocols and feeding procedures. Do not attempt to be heroic, human. Simply complete your assigned tasks and survive." After the commander left, Dejo helped Sora unpack her few belongings. She carefully placed her stuffed bear, Honey, on her pillow and arranged her collection of Earth storybooks on the small shelf beside her bed. "Daddy," she said as she organized her things, "why doesn't the blue man like us?" Dejo sat on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. "Commander Vexar isn't used to humans, sweetheart. Some aliens think we're weak because we're smaller or different from them. They don't understand that being different doesn't mean being weak." "Are you scared about tomorrow?" Sora asked, climbing onto the bed beside him. Dejo wrapped his arms around her. "A little nervous, maybe. But being nervous is good, it means we stay alert and careful. I've worked with dangerous animals before, remember? Back on Earth, I took care of lions and bears at the conservation center. But this is different," Sora said thoughtfully. "This is in space, and that creature looked so lonely." "Yes, it is different," Dejo agreed. "But whether they're from Earth or somewhere else, all living things need care and respect. Sometimes they just need someone to be kind to them." That night, Sora dreamed of the darkness behind the glass. In her dream, it wasn't frightening at all, it was just incredibly, achingly alone. She dreamed of shadows that reached out like hands, hoping for connection but finding only cold glass and terrified screams. When she woke the next morning, she had made a decision. She was going to help her daddy take care of the lonely creature, no matter what anyone else said. The next morning arrived with the artificial dawn cycle of the station's lighting system. Dejo prepared a simple breakfast while Sora sat at their small table, swinging her legs and watching her father with serious eyes. "You're really going to feed the scary creature today?" she asked. "It's not a monster, sweetheart," Dejo replied, checking his uniform. "It's just a being that's very far from home, like we are now." At exactly 0800 hours, there was a soft chime at their door. A tired-looking man stood in the corridor, his face bearing the kind of exhaustion that came from too many sleepless nights. "You must be Kim Dejo," the man said, extending his hand. "I'm Dr. Park Minso. I've been tasked with training you on the Voidstalker protocols." As they walked through the corridors toward the containment area, Dr. Park's expression grew increasingly grim. "I have to ask," he said quietly, "are you absolutely certain about this assignment? It's not too late to request a transfer to a different section." "Why would I want to do that?" Dejo asked. Dr. Park stopped walking and faced him directly. "Because it kills people, Mr. Kim. The last worker lasted 3 days. The one before that managed a week. The longest anyone has ever survived this assignment was a month." They continued walking in silence until they reached a heavily secured storage area. Dr. Park began pulling out equipment that looked more suitable for a spacewalk than a feeding routine: a thick, armored suit, a helmet with a darkened visor, and boots that seemed designed to anchor someone to the floor. "You must wear all of this," Dr. Park explained, his voice heavy with resignation. "The suit protects against energy drain, the helmet guards against psychic influence, and the boots will keep you stable if it tries to disorient you." Dejo examined the cumbersome equipment. "This seems like it would make the job more difficult." "It makes survival possible," Dr. Park replied grimly. "The Voidstalker can kill in multiple ways. It can stop your heart with fear, drain your life force, or drive you insane with dark visions. This gear is the only reason anyone lasts more than a few minutes in its presence." He showed Dejo the feeding material, a sealed container filled with thick, gray nutrient paste. "1 container every 3 days. You place it in the feeding slot, seal the chamber, and get out as quickly as possible. Do not make eye contact. Do not attempt communication. Some say it can speak, but its words are poison." As they approached the Voidstalker's containment area, Dejo could see the warning signs posted in dozens of languages, all conveying the same message: extreme danger, authorized personnel only. Through the massive observation window, the darkness writhed and pulsed, seeming to sense their approach. It gathered itself into almost familiar shapes, then dispersed like smoke, as if it couldn't quite remember how to be solid. "It knows we're here," Dr. Park whispered. "It can sense fear from incredible distances." But as Dejo watched the creature's movements, he felt no fear, only a profound sense of curiosity and, strangely, sympathy. The way it moved, the way it seemed to press against the glass when they appeared, it reminded him of the big cats at the conservation center, pacing their enclosures not from aggression, but from a desperate need for stimulation and connection. "How long has it been contained here?" Dejo asked. 5 years, Dr. Park replied. "They found it on a dead world at the edge of the galaxy. It was the only living thing on the entire planet." "The only living thing on a whole planet," Dejo repeated softly. "It must be incredibly lonely." Dr. Park stared at him in disbelief. "Lonely? Mr. Kim, it's a killer, not a pet. You cannot afford to anthropomorphize it." "I can feel sympathy for any living thing that's completely alone," Dejo replied quietly. As the two men spoke, neither noticed the way the darkness in the chamber had stilled, pressing against the glass as if straining to hear their conversation. Breaking protocol. Dr. Park helped Dejo into the heavy protective suit, the magnetic clamps sealing with ominous finality. Inside the helmet, Dejo's breathing sounded unnaturally loud, and the darkened visor cast everything in an eerie twilight. "Remember," Dr. Park's voice crackled through the communication system, "place the nutrient container in the feeding slot, activate the seal, and exit immediately. Do not deviate from protocol under any circumstances." Dejo picked up the container of gray paste, noting its surprising weight. Through his visor, he could see the Voidstalker's chamber door, a massive airlock designed to contain something far more dangerous than any earthly predator. The outer door cycled open with a deep pneumatic hiss. As Dejo stepped into the chamber, emergency lighting cast long shadows across the metallic walls. The inner door sealed behind him with a sound like a tomb closing. Immediately, the darkness rushed toward him. Most people would have screamed. Most would have dropped the food and fled. But Dejo stood perfectly still, watching in fascination as the Voidstalker enveloped him like a living shadow. Up close, it was nothing like he had expected. The darkness wasn't simply black, it contained depths of color like the deepest ocean or the space between stars. Midnight blues swirled with deep purples, and occasionally, flashes of silver moved through it like schools of fish in dark water. The creature flowed around him, not attacking, but investigating. Dejo could feel it probing at the edges of his mind, searching for the fear it expected to find there. When it found none, the Voidstalker pulled back in what seemed like confusion. "Hello," Dejo said through his helmet speaker. "I brought your food." From the observation chamber, Dr. Park watched in stunned silence. In all his years at the station, he had never seen the Voidstalker behave this way. It wasn't attacking or feeding, it was simply listening. The darkness coalesced into a roughly humanoid shape, as if remembering what it meant to have form. For 5 years, every creature that had entered its chamber had been consumed by terror. No one had ever spoken to it as if it were a being deserving of basic courtesy. Suddenly, a small voice echoed through the chamber's communication system. Sora had found the intercom controls in their quarters and was trying to reach her father. "Daddy," her innocent voice filled the chamber, "be careful with the creature, okay? And tell it I said hi." The effect on the Voidstalker was immediate and profound. The darkness quivered, then began to shift and change. Slowly, carefully, it formed what looked almost like a face, ancient, tired, but unmistakably intelligent. Dr. Park's hands shook as he activated the emergency communication channel. "Mr. Kim, you need to exit the chamber immediately. The creature is exhibiting unprecedented behavior." But Dejo remained calm, setting the nutrient container in the designated feeding area. "It's not aggressive," he reported back. "I think it's just curious." The Voidstalker approached the food cautiously, as if it had forgotten how to eat in the presence of another being. Tendrils of darkness touched the container, and Dejo could sense its surprise. After years of having food thrown at it by terrified workers, someone had actually brought it a meal with care. "You don't have to be afraid," Dejo said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." The creature's response was immediate, a wave of emotion so intense that it penetrated even the protective helmet. Loneliness, pain, confusion, and underneath it all, a desperate hunger for connection that had nothing to do with food. In the observation chamber, Commander Vexar arrived to find Dr. Park staring in disbelief at the security monitors. "What is the meaning of this?" Vexar demanded. "Why hasn't the human been eliminated?" I don't understand it," Dr. Park stammered. "The Voidstalker isn't attacking. It's almost like they're communicating." Through the chamber's speakers, they could hear Dejo's voice, calm and reassuring. "I know you're hungry. Not just for food, but for someone to talk to. My daughter and I are new here too. We understand what it's like to be far from home." The Voidstalker began to consume its meal, but slowly, almost delicately, as if remembering table manners from a distant past. As it fed, its form became more stable, more defined. Commander Vexar's mandibles clicked with agitation. "This is unacceptable. The creature is becoming more coherent. That makes it more dangerous, not less." But Dr. Park was studying the readouts from the chamber's sensors. "Sir, the energy readings are unusual. Instead of the typical aggressive spikes, we're seeing something more like contentment." In the chamber, Dejo had finished the feeding protocol, but instead of leaving immediately, he found himself sitting cross-legged on the floor, facing the creature. "You know," he said conversationally, "my daughter thinks you might be lonely. She has a good sense about these things." The Voidstalker's form rippled, and for a moment, something that might have been a voice whispered through the chamber, not heard, but felt directly in the mind. Alone, so long alone. Not anymore, Dejo replied gently. We're here now. Commander Vexar burst into the observation area's communication controls. Human. Exit the chamber immediately. You are in violation of all safety protocols. But when Dejo finally stood to leave, the Voidstalker did something unprecedented. It retreated to the far corner of its chamber, curling into what almost looked like a protective posture, as if trying to make itself smaller and less threatening. As the chamber door sealed behind him, Dejo could feel the creature's presence pressing against his mind one last time, not invasive or harmful, but like a gentle touch of gratitude. When he removed his helmet, Dr. Park saw that Dejo's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Mr. Kim, Dr. Park said quietly, what happened in there? Dejo looked back at the chamber where the Voidstalker now moved with less agitation, its form more peaceful than anyone had ever seen it. I think, Dejo said slowly, I just met someone who's been waiting 5 years for a friend. Commander Vexar's 4 arms crossed in a gesture of barely controlled fury. This ends now. The human will be transferred to waste disposal immediately. But before he could issue the order, Sora's voice came through the communication system again, having figured out how to access the station-wide intercom. Thank you for being nice to Daddy, creature, her cheerful voice echoed through the corridors. I hope you liked your food. Daddy makes the best meals. In its chamber, the Voidstalker pressed against the glass window, its form taking on an almost protective stance, as if it had just found something worth guarding. The truth revealed. Commander Vexar stormed through the corridors of Research Station Kepler 442, his 4 arms gesturing angrily as he prepared to terminate the human's assignment. But before he could reach the administrative center, an emergency alert klaxon began wailing throughout the station. All personnel to emergency stations, came the announcement. Containment breach in Sector 7. This is not a drill. The commander's mandibles clicked with frustration as he was forced to divert to the crisis. In Sector 7, one of the station's other dangerous specimens, a crystalline entity known for its violent tendencies, had damaged its containment field and was threatening to break free entirely. Meanwhile, Dejo had returned to his quarters to find Sora waiting anxiously by the door. How did it go, Daddy? She asked, searching his face for answers. Very well, sweetheart, Dejo replied, kneeling down to her level. I think you were right about the creature being lonely. Over the following days, as the emergency in Sector 7 demanded the commander's attention, Dejo continued his feeding duties with the Voidstalker. Each visit became less formal and more conversational. The creature began to maintain a more consistent form when Dejo arrived, still shadow-like, but distinctly humanoid. It would wait patiently for its food, and afterward, it seemed to listen intently as Dejo spoke about his life, about Sora, about their journey from Earth. Dr. Park, required to monitor these sessions, found himself increasingly fascinated by the transformation he was witnessing. The Voidstalker's aggressive energy readings had dropped to almost normal levels, and its behavior patterns were unlike anything in the station's records. It's remarkable, he confided to Dejo after the 5th day. The creature's biometric readings suggest it's actually content. In 5 years, we've never recorded anything like this. But it was Sora who made the breakthrough. Despite strict orders to stay away from the containment area, her curiosity eventually overcame her obedience. While Dejo was handling another routine feeding, she slipped away from their quarters and made her way to the observation chamber. When she arrived, she found Dr. Park monitoring the session from behind the protective glass. Her father was sitting cross-legged in the chamber, the Voidstalker coiled peacefully nearby, its form more stable and defined than ever before. It looks like Daddy's reading to it, Sora observed, pressing her nose against the glass. Dr. Park glanced down at her, then back at the chamber. He's been doing that for the past few days. Telling it stories about Earth, about you. The creature seems to enjoy it. Sora studied the scene more carefully. Dr. Park, why do you think it killed those other people? Because it's a predator, Dr. Park replied automatically, but his voice lacked conviction. But it's not trying to hurt Daddy, Sora pointed out. Maybe it was just scared. Dr. Park was about to dismiss her childish observation when something made him pause. He accessed the station's historical records, pulling up the files on the Voidstalker's previous encounters. What he found made his blood run cold. My God, he whispered, scrolling through the data. Sora, you might be right. The record showed a pattern that no one had bothered to analyze before. Every worker who had been killed by the Voidstalker had approached the creature with weapons, electric prods, or other aggressive implements. They had treated it not as a being to be cared for, but as a monster to be controlled through fear and pain. The creature's defensive responses had been interpreted as attacks, when in reality, it had been protecting itself from what it perceived as torture. It wasn't hunting, Dr. Park realized. It was defending itself. Meanwhile, in the chamber, the Voidstalker had begun to do something unprecedented. It was trying to communicate more directly. Tendrils of shadow reached toward Dejo, not to harm, but to touch his mind with images and emotions. Through this connection, Dejo saw flashes of the creature's past, its home world, a place of eternal twilight where beings of shadow and light lived in harmony. He saw its capture, its confusion at being caged, its terror at the prodding and poking of researchers who saw it only as a specimen. And he saw its gradual descent into desperate fury as year after year passed without a single being showing it kindness or understanding. You're not a monster, Dejo said aloud, tears streaming down his face. You're just lost and afraid. The emotional response from the Voidstalker was overwhelming, gratitude, relief, and something that felt very much like hope. Dr. Park rushed to the communication controls. Mr. Kim, I need you to exit the chamber immediately. I have something important to tell you. When Dejo emerged, Dr. Park's face was pale with shock and excitement. The creature isn't a killer, he said quickly. It's been defending itself. Every death was a result of aggressive handling. You've been treating it with respect, and look at the results. Before Dejo could respond, Commander Vexar's voice boomed through the corridor. Having resolved the crisis in Sector 7, he had returned to deal with what he considered the human problem. Step away from the containment area, Vexar ordered, his 4 arms reaching for his authority sidearm. The human's assignment is terminated effective immediately. But Sora, still pressed against the observation window, suddenly gasped. Look! Through the glass, they could see the Voidstalker pressing against the barrier, its form agitated and distressed. It had sensed the hostile intent in the corridor, and its protective instincts were emerging, not to attack, but to defend the humans who had shown it kindness. Don't hurt my friends, came a voice that seemed to speak directly into their minds, not invasive or terrifying, but clear and unmistakably intelligent. They care about me. Commander Vexar stumbled backward, his weapon clattering to the floor. In all his years of dealing with dangerous specimens, he had never heard one speak with such clarity and emotion. Impossible, he whispered. The creature is non-sentient. It's classified as a dangerous animal. No, Sora said firmly, turning to face the towering alien. It's not an animal. It's a person. And persons don't like being locked up and treated mean. The truth hit everyone in the corridor like a physical blow. The Voidstalker wasn't just intelligent, it was a sentient being that had been imprisoned, studied, and tormented for 5 years without anyone bothering to discover that it could think, feel, and communicate. Dr. Park's hands shook as he pulled up more files. Commander, I need to show you something. The classification reports, the behavioral assessments, they're all wrong. We've been treating a sentient being like a laboratory animal. The Voidstalker's voice reached them again, weaker now, filled with years of suppressed pain. I just wanted to go home. But no one would listen. No one would talk to me. They only brought fear and pain. Dejo stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. We're listening now. And we're going to help you. Commander Vexar's world had just shifted fundamentally. Everything he thought he knew about the station's most dangerous specimen had been revealed as a catastrophic misunderstanding. And now he had to decide what to do about it. A new beginning. The silence in the corridor stretched for what felt like an eternity. Commander Vexar stared at the containment chamber where the Voidstalker waited, its shadowy form pressed against the glass like a child seeking comfort. "This changes everything," Dr. Park whispered, still scrolling through the files that revealed the magnitude of their mistake. "We need to contact the Galactic Council immediately." But Commander Vexar was struggling with something deeper than protocol. His entire worldview had been shattered in the space of a few minutes. The creature he had used as a symbol of the station's power over dangerous forces was actually a victim of their ignorance and fear. "The Council will shut down the station," he said finally, his voice heavy with the weight of realization. "When they learn what we've done, keeping a sentient being in captivity, allowing it to be tormented by researchers who saw it as nothing more than a specimen." Sora tugged on her father's hand. "Daddy, can we help it go home?" The Voidstalker's voice reached them again, filled with a longing that cut through every heart in the corridor. "Home. I had given up hope of ever seeing my realm again. The place where shadow and light dance together, where my people sing the songs of the deep cosmos." Dejo stepped closer to the glass, his hand flat against the transparent barrier. "What is your name?" he asked gently. "Your real name, not what we've called you." The creature's form solidified, taking on a more defined humanoid shape. I was called Umbrin. It means, twilight child, in the language of my people." "Umbrin," Sora repeated carefully, her small voice filled with wonder. "That's a beautiful name." Commander Vexar found himself facing the most difficult decision of his career. He could follow protocol, maintain the containment, report the situation through proper channels, and let the bureaucracy decide Umbrin's fate. Or he could do what he was beginning to realize was right. "Dr. Park," he said slowly, "what would be required to transport our guest back to its home world?" Dr. Park looked up from his data pad in shock. "Commander, are you suggesting we release it?" "I'm suggesting we correct a terrible mistake," Vexar replied, his mandibles clicking with determination. "We have the coordinates of where Umbrin was found. We have transport capabilities. The question is whether we have the courage to do what's right." Over the following weeks, Research Station Kepler 442 transformed from a place of containment to one of preparation. The Galactic Council, when informed of the situation, was initially outraged, not at the proposed release, but at the years of unintentional imprisonment of a sentient being. Umbrin, no longer confined to the small chamber, was moved to a larger, more comfortable habitat while preparations for the journey home were made. For the first time in 5 years, the being had space to move freely, and its joy was palpable throughout the station. Dejo continued his role, but now as a companion rather than a caretaker. He and Sora would spend hours with Umbrin, learning about its home world and its people. In return, Umbrin shared stories of the cosmos that filled Sora's dreams with wonder. "My people are shepherds of the void between stars," Umbrin explained one day, its form rippling with colors that had no names in human language. "We tend to the spaces where light cannot reach, nurturing the dark matter that holds galaxies together. I was exploring the edge of known space when the collectors found me." "Will your family be waiting for you?" Sora asked, sitting cross-legged beside the being she now considered a friend. "My Bond family spans several star systems," Umbrin replied, and they could feel it smile even though it had no visible face. "They have been singing morning songs for me. When I return, the songs will change to celebration." Commander Vexar, meanwhile, had become an unexpected advocate for Umbrin's cause. He worked tirelessly with the Council to arrange not just transportation, but reparations, resources and technology that Umbrin's people could use to prevent future collecting incidents. The day of departure arrived with mixed emotions. A specially modified transport vessel waited in the station's main docking bay, its containment systems reconfigured to provide a comfortable environment for the journey home. As Umbrin prepared to leave, it approached Dejo and Sora one final time. "You gave me something I thought I had lost forever," it said, its mental voice warm with gratitude. Hope. Friendship. The knowledge that kindness exists even in the darkest corners of the universe. Sora hugged the shadowy form as best she could, feeling the cool touch of twilight against her arms. Will we ever see you again? The cosmos is vast but not infinite, Umbrin replied. Perhaps our paths will cross again among the stars. Until then, remember that whenever you look up at the night sky, there are beings like me tending to the darkness, making sure the light has something beautiful to shine against. Commander Vexar stepped forward, his 4 arms crossed in a gesture of respect. Umbrin, on behalf of Research Station Kepler 442 and the Galactic Council, I offer our deepest apologies for the years of your captivity. We failed to recognize your sentience, and that failure is ours to bear. Commander, Umbrin replied, from great mistakes can come great wisdom. This station will never again make the error of assuming a being's worth based on its appearance or origin. That is a victory worth years of suffering. As the transport ship powered up its engines, Dejo felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders. Sora had climbed up to get a better view of their friend's departure. Daddy, she whispered as they watched the ship disappear into the star field beyond the station, I'm glad we came here. Why's that, sweetheart? Because sometimes the scariest monsters just need someone to say hello. Dr. Park joined them at the observation deck, carrying a data pad filled with new protocols. The Council has approved a complete overhaul of our classification systems, he reported. Every specimen in our collection will be re-evaluated for sentience. We're also establishing a new position, Interspecies Communication Specialist. Commander Vexar approached, his expression unreadable. Mr. Kim, the Council has offered you that position, should you choose to accept it. Your unique approach to dangerous situations has proven invaluable. Dejo looked down at Sora, who was practically bouncing with excitement. What do you think, sweetheart? Should we stay and help make friends with more creatures? Yes. Sora exclaimed. And Daddy, can we tell them all about Umbrin? So they know that someone cared enough to listen. 3 months later, Research Station Kepler 442 had become a model for ethical xenobiology. Beings that had once been classified as dangerous specimens were revealed to be sentient entities with rich cultures and desperate homesickness. Many were reunited with their families. Others chose to remain as cultural ambassadors, sharing their knowledge with the diverse community that the station had become. Dejo's new role involved patience, empathy, and the kind of quiet courage that had made him perfect for feeding the deadliest creature in the galaxy. Sora, now known throughout the station as the little girl who had befriended the Voidstalker, had become something of a legend herself. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the artificial stars of the station's observation deck twinkled like earthly constellations, they would receive a transmission from the edge of known space, songs of joy and celebration from beings of shadow and light, thanking 2 humans for remembering that everyone, no matter how different or frightening they might seem, deserves kindness. Commander Vexar, reviewing the station's new mission reports, often found himself thinking about the lesson learned from one small human child. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't a monster in a cage, but the failure to recognize the person inside. In his final log entry for the day, he wrote, Personal note, today marks 6 months since the Umbrin incident, as it's come to be known in Council records. The station has never been more productive, more peaceful, or more proud of its mission. It seems that when you treat beings with dignity and respect, they respond in kind. Who would have thought that the key to managing dangerous specimens was simply to stop treating them as specimens at all? As he sealed the log, Commander Vexar smiled, an expression that would have terrified his old subordinates but now seemed perfectly natural. After all, he had learned from the best teachers, a patient father, a wise daughter, and a creature of shadow who had taught them all that the greatest monsters are often the ones we create through our own fear and ignorance. And in the deep spaces between the stars, Umbrin sang songs of gratitude, its voice joining the cosmic symphony that connected all living things across the vast, wonderful, and no longer quite so lonely universe. The end.